So, Allegory of the Cave. What did you think of it? Not all at once. What did you think? I need to go through the roll and ask people individually what they thought. No volunteers? Yes, ma'am.
For me, it's very hard to understand.
Okay. That's completely understandable, and that is kind of what I expected. Not to pass judgment on like any of y'all's reading level or anything like that, or your understanding of abstract metaphors and symbolism. It's just it's a thick read and it's boring. If you're not familiar with this, if you're not familiar with this style of writing, and someone just gives it to you and tells you to read it, and you don't go through it to your own free will, which I completely understand. If you just spend your free time like sitting around reading Socrates and Plato just because you enjoy to do it and you're a freshman in college, then there's something a little wrong with you. Like, it's completely understandable. This is the most difficult thing that you will read throughout the semester. Even as short as it was, it's incredibly dense, and the longer passages that you will read and the other essays and short stories are infinitely more easy to understand. And the reason that it's difficult to read is because it is, like I said, it's very dense. There's a lot of stuff going on here that is basically he's giving you an image. He's giving this. I mean, an allegory is a literary term. It's a tool that authors will often use, where they use symbols and images to illustrate a much larger point. Use a story to illustrate a much larger point and a much deeper idea. The Allegory of the Cave, like I said before, is the foundation of Western thought and our worldview, and kind of is essential to like the American spirit, the American collective ideology, and the American mythology that we kind of tend to live our lives based upon. So, all that to say that this really is about, one, it's about the nature of enlightenment. That is, I mean, if you look up what Allegory of the Cave, what is Allegory of the Cave about? It's about the nature of enlightenment, and that's exactly what Plato says here. There's a little backstory. This is Plato is a was the famous philosopher, obviously, but his teacher was Socrates. And so this is Plato's Allegory of the Cave. Plato himself was a student, and Socrates himself. This was taught to Plato by Socrates. And all of Western thought is really built upon the idea of the actualized individual. And as Americans, we very much are about the individual, right, and not a collective whole. And when I say a self-actualized individual, a person that knows exactly who they are and why they are the way that they are. They one of the most famous lines in philosophy is "Know thyself." Knowing yourself is the most important thing about your existence, and that is really often the most difficult thing about existence. So your existence itself is really knowing yourself and knowing exactly who you are, because that can be a very, very it is. If you're really trying to know who you are, that is a very, very painful process. And so you have in here a method of storytelling that is also, you'll see parallels all throughout literature and movies and religion as well. So you have this process of enlightenment that is being discussed here, what that means to be enlightened, but you also have a story arc that's set up in this Allegory of the Cave with these prisoners that are in the cave and the one prisoner that is brought out and then comes back down to free the other prisoners. And you'll see that that story arc be repeated throughout religions, throughout novels and short stories, and for the world that we live in now, television and movies. You'll see the same things happen over and over and over and over again. And the reason for that is because I want you to begin to understand the concept that stories can contain truths, that art can contain truths, right? That ideas can be true, but not necessarily like they're. Most people like to believe that we see things in black and white, right? And people often pride themselves like it's either yes or no. It's either black and white. And the reality of the situation, like we know that there is no such. We know that a black and white existence does not exist for us, right? Everything is a balance between the black and the white, and it's all shades of gray. And so with the idea of of truth, or what truths are, right? We like to believe that there's a single truth, right? And that's difficult to that's difficult to prove. But there are multiple truths, and that's kind of the purpose of storytelling and philosophy and this as well, being a self-actualized individual. So if you look at looking at just the importance of story real quick, if you look at the importance of story and what the story that is contained here, we have our hero, who also is very much a martyr in this story as well. The reason that we see these similar traits in story arcs and in our heroes in literature and in storytelling is because the hero is someone that there's a truth about a hero in a story, that we kind of inherently know that we should try to be like that person, right? And not that you can be that person, because heroes in stories are impossible to live up to, right? But the purpose of a hero in a society, or a hero in a story, is to give the individual a goal to which you work towards, right? So, for example, in our world today, like if you look at like modern gods or modern mythological figures, you could look at something like Captain America, or you could look at someone like Superman, right? Those are modern mythological characters for us. And like, I don't want to hang out with Captain America at a party because like he's corny, right? He's boring. He's got the clean cut haircut. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. He doesn't curse. He doesn't do any of the things that are they're kind of like fun, right? Because he's too perfect as a real person, right? But if I were, I wake up and like have like a poster of Captain America like on my wall that I try to be like. But if I were going to live like someone, right? Like you'd want to try to be like Captain America. You'd want to try to be like Superman, right? Because they are kind of perfect individuals, or within the context of like the Bible, right? Which is what most of Western society's virtues and morality are built upon, is living like Jesus, right? Because obviously Jesus was, if you believe the Bible, and Jesus, was a real man and all that stuff. He was the perfect person, right? And of course, we all know that we're not perfect, right? But if you try to live in that manner, if you try to live a perfect life, ultimately you know that you will fail, but you're on the right path. So, heroes in stories are an amalgamation of character traits that you want to have. That if you try to live your life in that manner of that hero, then you will be on the right path. So, and the reason that they are a culmination of all these characters is because if you look back, whenever human beings were living in caves and we didn't have the written language, we were just like scratching stick figures on cave walls. Well, that way of life back then, we were hunters and gatherers, and we had to go out. Men would leave the tribe, and they would go out into the darkness, into the jungle, into the forest, into the plains, and they would slay great beasts, right, with sticks and stones and atlatls, and then bring back meat to provide for the tribe, and bring back skins and pelts to keep the women and children and fellow men warm, right? They would go slay great dangerous things that would surely eat you if you messed up, right? And because of that, they were heroic, right? Those traits. They were going out into the darkness and saving the tribe themselves, and they would do that on a regular basis. And so if you look at how just look at human nature, right? If I have a son, right, and I could tell him about this great warrior or this great hunter in my tribe, or I could tell him about this skeevy dude that goes into my tent at night, or comes into my cave and steals meat from me and my children, right? Or steals the skins from me and my children. We don't have a blanket to sleep around, or steals our fire, or whatever. Who am I going to want my son to be like? Yes, the hero, right? Right. So those stories get passed down, and these heroes, they get more and more of these heroic traits, like kind of tacked on to what a hero is. Right, so eventually, thousands of years later, we know what a good guy is. We know what a hero is. And you choose to live your life in that manner, or you choose not to. But it's like you don't know what it means to be a good person. Right? There's a certain truth that has been passed down over and over and over and over, to where if you're going to be a good person, you know pretty much the essential qualities. And that transcends culture, that transcends language, that transcends everything except just this truth of what it means to be good. And so, with that, though, that is not a black and white thing, right? Always imagine when you're discussing ideas and truths about the world, that, like, if this whole room was completely dark, it was just a big black room. The windows were all black. It was just pitch black in here, and then there was a light bulb, like not like a fancy new LED, but like an old school yellow light bulb that had like the filament and stuff, and it was sticking up, and it was in the middle of the room, and it was on. Right now, you could see the center of the light bulb, and you would know that that is like pure. That is pure light, right? And light always represents truth. Right? Light always represents goodness, right? But you wouldn't be able to see really in a dark room, completely dark room, and have this light bulb. You really wouldn't be able to see the edge of the light bulb itself, where the darkness starts and where the light begins, right? Now you can see like in far corners, right? Like, well, that's pitch black over there, and in the center there's the light, right? But in between is what? Well, there's space and there's haze, right? It's a mixture of the darkness and a mixture of the light, right? And so the reality of the situation is that our world is filled with those truths, which is like that haze, right? But it's very, very difficult for us to find like a single truth that is like the center of that light. Like, yes, this is 100% absolutely right. This is 100% actually wrong. And we spend so much time. People spend so much time trying to find that one like singular truth that is that is something so concrete. Whenever the world is filled with these truths that are they're a little more hazy, like the truths of what are contained in stories. So what you've got is like the quintessential story of Western society and what our heroic figure does, and also what society or what happens to that heroic individual. So the whole point of this is the individual and the individual's place in society, right? Because you can look at the way that many people would argue that your entire life you're seeking out balance. We try to you go back and forth, often to two sides of the spectrum, 3 or 4, depends on who you are, trying to seek balance for yourself. And so if you look at the idea of the individual becoming enlightened, and what happens to the individual once they are enlightened, the importance of knowing who you are, why you believe what you believe, all of that stuff. And then from that point, recognizing the fact that you as an individual also share this planet or share this room or share your society with a bunch of other individuals. Again, the individual and then the rest of society, and the balance that needs to be struck between the two. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's the age-old question, like why am I here? Why do I exist? What is my place in this world? Which people, we still try to, are trying to find the answers for. Plato would say that it is to seek enlightenment. So if you look if you want to look at how this story is built, how this argument is built, one of the things that you're going to be doing in this class, you're going to have 5 different styles of essays, and for each essay, you're going to have a style of writing so that you can most logically and clearly execute your point, right? To explain yourselves. And what Plato shows us here is this kind of like question and answer format. And what he does is that he builds his argument like brick by brick. And so literally what he does is he paints this word image for his student here. And it says, look, here we see this, whatever it is. Here we see this man in a cave. And the man looks at shadows. And da-da-da-da. Do you agree on this? And the student's like, yes, I agree. I agree. And then Plato, well, then this happens. And then if this happens, then we can assume that this happens. And the student's like, yes, I agree. And Plato, the whole time, is writing like the teacher's like, do you agree with this? And the student's like, yes, I agree. Do you agree with this? Yes, I agree. And so the metaphor for that would be like brick by brick, using a brick wall, right? If I've got a pile of bricks over here and some mortar, and then I pick up a brick, I'm like, this is in my hand. I hold a brick. Do you all agree that this is a brick? I pass it around. All of you can look at it. And, yep, okay, it's a brick. Boom, stick it down. And I take up another brick. You all agree that this is a brick. Yes. Boom, boom, boom. You go brick after brick after brick after brick. And then when I'm done, and I've got these bricks all stacked up, and I'm like, this is a brick wall, right? And you would all have to say what? Yes. How do you know that it's a brick wall? Because you've inspected every single brick and you've seen them built in the shape of a wall. So therefore, it must be a brick wall. You've agreed every step of the way, right? So oftentimes, if you're looking at just a logical way of thinking, or a logical way of presenting an argument, that's a that's the foundation of Western thought, right? Is that you're like, okay, do we agree on this? Good. Now we can move on to this point. Do we agree on this? good. Now we can move on to this point. And so if I'm leading you down this road of like, you agree with this, you agree with this, you agree with this, then at the end you have no choice but to agree with what I'm saying, because you've agreed with every step along the way. How do you not agree with the end result if you've agreed with every single step that has taken along the way in my argument, but you not agree with the ending, right? Or you not agree with the final thought, or you not agree with the final product. This is something that again, was revolutionary really at the time for it to be written down and to be passed down, and is in many ways the basis of argument, or an argumentative style, and a critical way of thinking, which is something that you guys want to integrate into your own papers, right? Does each piece make sense, and then can you tie it together as a whole? Okay, so if you haven't already, star or highlight these sections. Here he says at the top says next said I compare our nature with respect of education, and really it depends on kind of like the translation, because newsflash, like Plato didn't speak in English. That this is about, like I said, the nature of enlightenment. And what does it mean to be enlightened?
To reach an understanding.
Yes, to reach an understanding, to be an actualized person, to reach an understanding, to know. The thing about enlightenment is that it never stops, right? I mean, and you'll find this out as you, many of you guys are co-enrolled, so you'll find this out. I mean, I'm sure you probably know this now, but you'll find this out as you get older. The older you get, the more you realize that you don't know anything. Right? And that is a level of enlightenment that if you are conscious of you and your place in the world, you will continue to see that. And just like as a small example, right? And the fact that you don't know the fact that you don't know so many things should push you to want to know more. And the more that you learn, the more that you realize you don't learn, which again reinforces your place in the universe for most people, or should at least. You also have, just within the word enlightenment, obviously the key word is light. And you'll see how that plays out in this image as well. This painting that I'm going to show you in a bit about the allegory of the cave, that illustrates the allegory of the cave. Right? I mean, just inherently, we know that light is good and darkness is bad. Right? You're supposed to love the light and hate the dark, or be afraid of the dark and the shadows, unless you're like an emo kind of kid that like acts like you like the darkness, but you don't like the real darkness, right? You like to play darkness in the light. You don't like the real darkness. Nobody does. Why don't we like the dark? Why is it inherent? Why are we afraid of the dark?
Because it's what we don't know. That's in there.
Yes. Not only like on a metaphorical level do we not like the dark because it's like it represents the unknown, but because oftentimes that can be like attractive, right? I'm going to go into the darkness and find the unknown. That's only if I know that I'm safe. You don't like the dark on a biological level because at night, whenever we were like sleeping in caves, creatures with thick fur and big fangs would eat you. Monsters exist in the darkness, and that exists on a very real physical level, right? Monsters exist in the darkness, and for thousands of years they would snatch babies from their mother's arms and mothers themselves and tear them to shreds. The darkness is a place of monsters and evil and the unknown, right? And the light is good, right? Because I can see a predator coming, right? Monsters don't come out in the day, and if they do come out in the day, at least I have a chance because I can see what's going on. Not only do you have like just that's a setup of like the importance of the sun and the shadows. Carries on with that metaphor. The idea of shadows is going to be very, very important later on. The idea of light and fire is also very important, right? Because fire plays a part in this story. But fire is important to man because fire is light, right? Fire is artificial light. Fire is something that obviously is created by nature, but man is able to create fire, to conjure up fire. And throughout most mythologies, throughout many mythologies at least, you see the importance of fire being taken from gods, right? So, Zeus and Apollo and like the old mythology, you'll have, even like in Native American mythology, you'll have gods that are called trickster gods. And trickster gods, the most relevant or the most well-known trickster god now is Loki from the Thor movies. Well, Loki was an actual Norse god, and very, very different in actual Norse mythology than it's portrayed in the comic books, obviously, and in the movies. But trickster gods usually had an affinity for man. Trickster gods usually kind of loved men or mankind because mankind kind of screws up. And trickster gods like to play tricks. They like to cause mischief. And one of the great things that they could do is they could take, if they took fire from the gods and gave it to man, then man, that would cause discourse between man and God. Man no longer really needs God. Fire, not only, it represents knowledge. Fire is symbolic for the start of civilization for man and start of knowledge for man. But also, fire keeps us, on a biological, on a physical level, fire keeps us warm, right? And fire, there's a reason why man slept around fires, thousands of years ago. Because one, it kept you warm. And two, it kept the predators away at night, right? It kept the wolves away. You sleep around a fire, and a wolf is not going to come near it. By and large, I'm sure there are exceptions. I know there are exceptions, but by and large, fires keep the monsters away, and they keep you warm at night in the cold darkness, right? So you have that set up. You have that imagery set up, and through storytelling and through religion. It is a very, very important thing. So to become enlightened, right, means that you have light within yourself, and that light within yourself, casts out the darkness. It casts out the shadows. I mean, and if you can't hear the obvious language parallels between that and Christianity, like we'll get even further. This is the message of Christianity before Christianity was Christianity. This is also the message of like famous movie after famous movie after famous movie. Right, the lightness and the darkness, and then the bearer of light coming down. Okay, so let me see here. At the bottom of the second page, here in that section I have know thyself, because that's not the quote there, but it ties into the idea of that knowing yourself is one of the most important things that you can do. And should be the point of, that should be the singular, maybe not the singular point of your life, but that should be a huge factor in your life, is trying to know yourself. And here he talks about, I have here pain and truth. When you talk about looking upon the sun and your eyes hurting, we'll get back to that in a second with movies, but pain and truth. So before I go to the actual image of the allegory, the actual image of the cave and all that stuff, and walk you through all this big picture stuff here, I talk about knowing yourself, and then I have here pain and truth. And why is knowing yourself and knowing your truth, knowing the truth about yourself, knowing the truth about why is that a painful experience?
Because we have flaws.
Yeah, because you're not that great of a person. You want to think that you are, but you're not. None of us are. I mean, we all seek comfort, and that is one of the, when we talk about balance a lot. Well, I will whenever we talk about these big picture ideas, seeking balance. One of the issues that we've got in our society today, especially in America today, we come to an interesting crossroads, because we are creatures of comfort, and so because of that, just as animals, we have always sought comfort, and because of that, that has pushed us to progress our society and technology and get to the point where we are now. But again, too much of anything is a bad thing, right? We've got ourselves now to where we live in a world, we live in a society that is nerfed for us, right? That has no sharp edges for us to cut ourselves. We're protected entirely compared to, even just compared to the rest of the world. The rest of the world, well, most of the world, is so much softer than it was before. You can go too far to one extreme, because to be comfortable is going to breed like atrophy, right, and stifle progress. So if you look at that at just the very basic level of just knowing myself, right now, I do not have to be engaged with myself or the world around me, right? Because we've developed technology, and so much so that I can, at any point in time, even like right now, if I'm done with you guys and I just tell you to zoom it to, I just told you to start writing an essay right now, I could take my phone and I could binge on Netflix behind my computer screen and not engage any of you for the rest of the day. and not engage my own reality for the rest of the day, not engage my place or acknowledge my place in this world or the effect that I have on other people or the flaws that I have. Because we have a world that is just, again, nothing but comfort, and we can disengage from that world. And so the idea that truth is a painful thing is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like if you want to have bigger arms or like toner legs or a tighter stomach or whatever, what do you have to do? You got to work out, right? Like if you want bigger muscles, right? If you want like a smaller stomach, you just stop eating, I guess. But if you want bigger muscles, you want to have gains, massive gains, dude. If you want to have gains, what do? You lift weights. Okay, the byproduct of lifting weights is that eventually you will get arms. What is the immediate ramification of lifting weights if you've never lifted weights before? And you go in there and you're throwing 45, but you're just ranking them out. Steroids? No, you do that to get the gains faster. The next day you're going to be sore. You're not going to be able to lift your arms because it hurts, right? Because you haven't used your arms before, and that's pain. We know this. We know everything. I think there's like a book, there's like a little saying, like you learned everything that you're supposed to learn by the time that you were in like third grade. And that's true. Your body is a physical reminder of like the metaphorical leaps that you're supposed to make as a person. If you want to progress physically in any capacity, you have to put forth effort. And that effort is going to cause you pain. It's going to make you sore, right? But you deal with the pain and you embrace the pain so that it can bring you to the next level. We have no problem understanding that on a physical level. Because if you do that on a physical level, you have like a hot body and people want to be around you, people want to sleep with you, or people will find you attractive, or people will pay you money to take your shirt off, or whatever. Like we understand that, or people will pay you money to run fast, or hold a ball. We get that. And that is extremely valued for us in our culture. But to do the same thing with your knowledge of the world, or your own worldview, or just to become a smarter person, like thinking sucks. Like it's not, like that requires effort and requires mental pain, right? To acknowledge your place in the world, like, you know what, like I've lived 35 years on this planet thinking one thing, and I was wrong, and every single person that I treated this way because of whatever circumstance was wrong, and that I have shame for that. Is that easier to acknowledge that, or is it easier to find a group on Facebook or a group on Twitter that I can follow and then reinforce my ideas for myself? Right now, in the world that you live in, you can live, and me as well. If whatever way I want to see the world, I can find enough evidence to support the way that I want to see the world. But does that mean that that's the way that the world is? No, of course not. Of course not. That's why, if you look at our country right now, this is a perfect example of this, right? Our country has not been as divided as this socially in my lifetime. And what's amazing is you have different factions of the world, or of our society at least, that see the world in completely different spectrums. And a major problem, or a major reason for that, is because, like, there's a thing, facts don't have feelings. But what you do have are people that will appeal, that can give kind of like neutered facts, or can give things out of context to appeal to how you feel, right? And people can tell you exactly what you want to hear because you have you have a gut reaction. Like, no, you know what? I think that this might be the way the world is, or I think these people might be like this because of this. And then if you go searching for the information to verify what you feel, that is a dangerous road to go down. But that is how the vast majority of our population, one, gets informed and stays informed, based off your bias that all of you have already, depending on your socioeconomic background, your culture, what your parents tell you, what your church tell you, whatever, right? So to wade through the mess of information that is out there, to wade through your own bias that you all have, we all have biases, to try to wade through all of that and then actually try to realize the truth about the world that you live in and about yourself in that world. That is a painful thing that does not get solved overnight. Trying to know who you are is an up at dawn siege that never ends. And I don't want to do that because, like, The Voice starts tonight. And I want to see who is going to win and who Miley Cyrus is going to pick as her judge. And now Jennifer Hudson's she's a judge, and I'm going to see what kind of damage she's going to do. And I'm going to see Blake, and I do watch The Voice, but my wife makes me. So that's what I'm talking about. The commercial came on last night during the football game, and my wife was like, she wasn't even in the room. She was in the kitchen cooking. She's like, oh my God, we got to watch The Voice tomorrow night. So I'm like bracing for that tonight because I know all the stuff that goes on. Anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna do that. Like, I'm not gonna sit and meditate Have any of you ever tried to meditate before?
Yeah.
Sucks. Horrible. It is horrible. I like every morning. I like to. I don't have a good day unless I wake up at 5 every morning and I go work out before I come here, because if I didn't, I would not. You really would not want to be in this class. It's just very grumpy. And I would rather do heavy deadlifts every single day of my life than sit for 15 minutes in the lotus position and thinking about nothing. Train your brain to think about nothing. You can't think about nothing for 15 seconds. If I tell you to think about nothing, you start thinking about something. All right? The only time that students tend to not think about anything is when I'm actually talking to them. I should be like a guided meditation expert or something. You can't do it because it's a painful thing to train your brain to really be able to concentrate on something. So that's why pain is inherent with truth, because facts, again, they don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your emotions. They are facts, right? But we don't like that anymore. You can see there are so many social issues that are being derived right now. We talked a lot about with some like the gender pronouns and all that stuff earlier, that have no basis in science or in facts whatsoever, but they are accepted as truth, and they're based upon feeling. I feel this way, so it must be true. And that's something that is a byproduct of living in a society where your feelings are much more important than anything that is actually true or logical. And so our students, I've been seeing that for the past several years through students' writings, where they feel things are true. They're going to argue a point of view, and they feel things are true. And so because they feel that they are true, they must be true. And that is not true. It may be true that you feel that. That's a real thing, right? You truly feel that. But that doesn't make it a physical truth, or it doesn't make it a truth that is acceptable to me or should impact my life in any way, because it is not true outside of your brain. And that's a byproduct of the world that we're living in now, which is interesting, because this is like the antithesis of where we're at now in many respects. And it's the foundation of Western society. So let's look at, let me log in here real quick. Okay, so this is the image that Plato talks about. So, now this character arc here that we'll see when we talk about truths and stories, I wanted to touch back on. This is always a good example that I use. I got this from this guy named Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's a psychology and psychiatry professor from Canada, and he used this example, so I'm stealing it from him. But the idea that you know everything that you're supposed to know to be a good person in this world, to make your way through this world, you know that by the time you're in the 3rd grade. A perfect example of this, I had a 2-year-old daughter, picture there, and a 2-month-old son, and I read to my daughter every single night. And the stories that I read to her, think about the stories that may have been read to you, or the stories that you watched on television, or your Sunday school stories if you went to church, or whatever. The stories that you read growing up, right? There was no bad guy that was the good guy, right? Like, you were taught essentially how to be good. Not only were you taught essentially how to be good, you were taught how to confront the world, how to view the world. There's a children's story about an imaginary dragon. And there's a mother, a father, and a son, I forget his name, Billy. He's about 5 or 6 years old. And the father is never around. The father doesn't show up to the very end of the story. The story is like 12 pages long, so it's not like you're reading War and Peace or anything. So the mother is always at home with her son, Billy. And the mother and Billy don't spend too terribly much time together throughout the story. And Billy starts to see a dragon. He sees this dragon, and it appears, and it's very small. It's like a lizard. And then he runs and tells his mom, "Hey, Mom, I saw a dragon." She's like, "Where?" She goes back and she looks. She's like, "Oh, there's no dragon here. Probably saw a lizard, whatever." And then mom goes away. And the next day, Billy sees another dragon. Except the dragon now is not the size of a lizard. It's like the size of like a Gila monster or something, right? So it's a lot larger. Mom comes back, she said there's no lizard, on and on and on it goes. And it goes through several days or a week or so, I can't recall off the top of my head. Finally, Billy sees this dragon again, and it's huge. It's taking up the whole room. And he screams, and dragons are fierce, right? They're scary creatures. Dragons are famous because they are famous for hoarding things, right? Specifically gold. So, and we'll get back to the gold in a second. So the dragon takes up the whole room, and Billy goes and tells his mom. And then, Billy's mom, one last time, she comes back to Billy's room. She's like, Billy, there is no dragon. I'm tired of this. There's no dragon. Dragons don't exist. And on and on and on. And it's the moments that she says, the dragons don't exist. I don't want to hear about it anymore. The dragon appears, and his arms and his legs, now it's 5 times the size of what it was. Now it's like the full-grown dragon on Game of Thrones style. And it has his arms and his legs. They pop out the windows of the house. And the dragon gets up, and it rolls, and it starts running down the hill, running down the street. That's got this big house on its back, and Billy and his mom are like left in the front yard. Like, what the hell happened? And the mom's like, "There's a dragon there." And Bill's like, "Yeah, I know. I've been trying to tell you there's a dragon for a week, and you won't listen to me." And so right around that time, the father comes home. We haven't seen the father all book, and the father's like, "Where's our house?" And the mom's like, pointing like, "It's down there." And there's a dragon running away with it. It's like, "There's a dragon in our house." And I'm like, yeah, weird, right? And in the moment that the father and the mother, they both like, yeah. I guess there was a dragon after all. And the moment that they acknowledge that there was a dragon, poof, the dragon disappears. The house magically is placed back on its slab, and everything is well. Okay, so that is a beautiful story about the most real conversations that you ever need to have in your life. Because dragons are fearsome monsters that will burn you alive and steal your wealth. Because dragons love gold. Think about, again, taking out Game of Thrones style stuff. Dragons have always been the bad guys in the mountain sleeping on a pile of gold. And it's always been the heroes that go to the mountain. That's like straight out of Lord of the Rings, which is like one of the most obvious parallels to this as well as Christianity in the Western world. And they go to steal the gold, and they go to get the gold, and kill the dragon. Now, gold is the most valuable currency that we have. Gold represents not only wealth, it represents value. And you can ascribe whatever that value is. It can be money, it can be love, it can be relationship, it can be children, it can be family, it doesn't matter. So, within the context of this story, right, the mother doesn't want to acknowledge that there is a dragon. And that dragon is hoarding, it has value, right? It's taking value from the family. So, for example, the father is, let's just extrapolate here, the father is never around, and they have a big nice house, so let's say the father works 80 hours a week so that they can afford this house, right? But because of that, the father is never at home, and let's say that the mother and the father, I don't know, maybe they no longer have sex, and they don't have a good relationship at all, and there's this icy distance between them. They don't communicate anymore because the father is always working to provide for his family, but then the mother turns to resent him because he's never there. That's a dragon, right? Let's say that, for an example, maybe the father is an alcoholic, and that's why he's never there. The father is an alcoholic. Now, I don't know. I hope that none of you have had this displeasure, that have not had this unfortunate experience in your life. But if you've ever had the displeasure or the unfortunate experience to live in a home where one person, or maybe both, are alcoholics, are addicts, that is a dragon in your house. And do children see that?
Yes.
100%. Children spot the dragon before anybody else. So if you don't acknowledge that dragon, it's just like I heard this growing up, right? I didn't clean my room for like a week, and my mom came in my room. Like, is this room going to what? Clean itself. Of course it's not going to clean itself, right? Of course it's not going to clean itself. It's only going to get worse, right? By not acknowledging it, only gets worse. Yeah, you guys are, most of you, relatively young people, right? So maybe the rest of my classes, they're all right outside of high school, and so they're kind of out living on their own, or they have their own budget and all that stuff. Your dragon can be your bills, right? If you don't pay your bills this month, what's going to happen next month? They grow. They don't go away, they grow, right? But like, I don't know, this Thursday they're having like $3 margaritas at like Rita-Ritas, and I got $50. I got my cell phone bill is $75. I've got $125. That means I can spend $50 on margaritas. That's a lot of margaritas, but for myself and this other girl that I'm trying to impress, or whatever, right? And then when you're at Rita-Ritas and you're like 3 margaritas deep or something, and then you're trying to go over your budget in your mind, trying to balance things out. There's a pretty girl out there, and you want to impress her and not, act like you don't have enough money so you can buy her some and all that stuff. That's when that dragon appears, right? And you're like, I'll deal with it later. Like, I'll deal with it later. I'll put it on a credit card, right? The bills don't go away. They're not forgiven. They don't go away. The dragon only grows. That can be like a communication and relationship, right? If you have a relationship, especially if you're married, right, and you got something that's going on, and there's you and your husband have issues, or you and your wife have issues, and you don't deal with them, they never go away. They only grow, and they only grow and grow and grow until it becomes unmanageable, and that dragon runs away with your home, and your home is your family. And so that is the most important, to confront your dragon, no matter what it is. The most important, I say that a lot, so obviously it's not the most important, is one of the most important lessons that you can have. And we know that whenever we are 6 years old, and we spend the rest of our lives not confronting that truth, knowing that truth is there, but not wanting to acknowledge that is you want to make a difference in your life, confront your dragon, no matter what it is. We know that from the time we're 6 years old. We're just too stupid to pay attention to that, and we just keep running from that truth. The importance of this story here, right? You have this story of this prisoner here, and he's locked up down here. And from the time that he was a baby, this is all that he's ever seen. He's known these shadows. That's all he's ever seen. He's been chained there since he was a kid, head, arms, everything chained, looking at this wall. Behind him is the fire. Fire is artificial light. You have this wall and these men behind him holding up these puppets. Now, what's this?
It's a horse.
It's not a horse. It's not a Pegasus either. What is it? It's a shadow of what? It's a shadow of what? It's not a shadow of a horse either. It's a shadow of a puppet of a horse. Horses are up here. Right? It's not a horse. But that's a perfect example because I asked you what it was. You're like, it's a horse. Yeah. To this dude, yeah, that's a real horse. But how do we know that it's not a horse? We're enlightened, right? We see the truth. We are on the outside. So, but for him, there is no way in hell that any of us are ever going to convince him that is not a horse. Dude, I've been here for 35 years, staring at this damn horse for 35 years, all day, all night. That is a horse. It's not. But there's no convincing. Because, one, he lives in the darkness, and he believes that the shadows are the truth. And so, even here, right, we know that this is not the truth either. This is just a representation that is more permanent than the actual truth, which is up above. So, what Plato says is, imagine that we free this prisoner. And that, obviously his arms and legs are atrophied. He's never used them before. So we have to drag him up. And this is the prisoner going up into the light. Here, they have this action of him putting his hands over his eyes because his eyes hurt. Because he's never seen the sun before. And then he goes up into the light. He over time, he is gradually able to look upon the sun. Not like he stands all day like a weirdo just staring at the sun. Right? But he's gradually able to see the sun for what it is. And to see the world around him and gradually able to accept that this new world around him is actually the real world and he's been living in darkness his whole life. So, being a good guy that he is, being our hero of the story, he comes back down and he's going to go save his fellow prisoners. And within the context of the story, what